Welcome to our worship service from the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence. I'm Laura Porter, and I'm your Zoom Tech host this morning. Rebecca Smith is our second host. I'm very glad to see you here. We strive to be a congregation.
Laura, you're muted. Oh, she's not. I am.
I think your sound's off, Janet.
Was I heard?
Yes.
Okay, I'll continue. We strive to be a congregation that welcomes people of all ages, races, religious beliefs, backgrounds, gender identities, and abilities. We belong to the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and we are guided and inspired by its values and principles. Those values and principles move us to remember that we in Northampton inhabit unceded land of the Pecumtuck and Nipmuc peoples. Our values and principles remind us to acknowledge our responsibility to face all the painful legacies of dispossession and systemic racism that are part of our collective history, even as we affirm and celebrate the legacies that inspire us. We are here to support and celebrate one another and to renew ourselves with hope and gratitude and new resolve. If you are new or returning after a time away, welcome. We're very glad that you're here. Please feel free to fill out a virtual visitor card. Doing that allows us to put you on our email contact list. There is a link to the card in the chat room. We ask now that you remain muted throughout the service and turn off your videos, except during the greeting. This helps to allow the technology to work as smoothly as possible. And we hope that you'll stay for social hour afterwards. It's a great way to engage in meaningful conversation with people you might not otherwise have met. And now we'll begin our service.
As we come together this morning, let us renew our commitment and our covenant. For those among us who are struggling, let us help rekindle hope. For those among us who are celebrating, let us be glad with them. For those who have stories to share, let us listen with open hearts, and let us continue our free and responsible search for truth and covenant to honor the many paths that we are all following. And now please join in saying the words to accompany lighting our chalice as Booker lights it for us this morning. May this flame we light remind us that every one of us can bring light into the world. May the wisdom of the ages speak to us through this flame and stay in us. Every one of us can be a blessing to the world. And now we'll join in singing together, O Come, Emmanuel.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Harwood, and I'm the Director of Faith Development and Community Engagement here at USNF. Our story today comes from the Gospel of Luke from the Bible. We don't often do Bible stories, and many of you will recognize this one. It's the Good Samaritan. Janet, however, has updated our story for modern times. So we invite you to imagine yourself perhaps far away from here on a mountainside, or maybe at Mount Tom. There are pictures to help you get into the story. Once upon a time, a man was riding his motorcycle on a steep, winding road up a mountain. He had a sidecar with nearly all of his possessions in it. He liked the feeling of freedom riding his bike. The road climbed higher, and suddenly he went into a bank of thick fog. I should slow down, he thought, as he started around a sharp curve, but it was too late. He lost control and his bike skidded out, across the road and over the rail. The bike crashed down the mountain, and the man lay by the side of the road. He could tell right away that something was wrong with his leg, and he couldn't get up. In the distance, he saw the lights of a car approaching. It was a fancy car. The people in it had important jobs in the city, miles and miles away. Up ahead, as they approached the sharp curve, they saw the man lying on the side of the road. The driver started to slow down. "He's probably just taking a nap," said the person in the back seat. "Yeah, that's probably what's going on," said the person in the passenger seat. "Should we stop and check?" asked the driver. "And be late for our meeting? It's worth our next promotion," said one. "It's none of our business," said the other. "Right," said the driver. They turned their eyes away and the car hurried off. The man watched as the tail lights disappeared. He couldn't move and started to worry that it was going to get dark. "What's going to happen to me?" he wondered. A while later, another car came along. The driver was an important leader of an important church. He stopped his car and went over to talk to the man. "What happened to you?" he asked. The man could hardly speak. He pointed to his leg and to the other side of the road where his bike had disappeared. "Have you been drinking?" asked the important man. "I can't help you. I'm on my way to do a wedding and I can't get my clothes wrecked." And off he went. And then along came a motorcycle, almost exactly like the one that had gone over the edge. This rider's name was Luca. Luca worked hard, mostly at jobs no one else wanted, and had always been careful to save money. Now Luca was on their first ever vacation. But nevertheless, they stopped and went over to check on the injured man. "My name is Luca," they said. "You look like you need some help." The man nodded. Luca took off their own jacket and shirt and tied the shirt around the man's leg. Then they gave the man a sip from their water bottle and helped him, very gently, to get up. He had to lean hard on Luca so as not to put weight on his injured leg. Somehow, Luca managed to get the man into the sidecar. They drove all the way to an inn, and Luca asked the innkeeper to look after the man while he healed. "I lost my wallet," the injured man said. "I can't pay." Luca handed over some money. They remembered a street sweeping job in a nearby city they could take instead of going on vacation. "Don't worry," Luca said. "I'll be back this way in 2 weeks, and if you need more money, I'll have it then." And that is exactly what happened. And that's the end of our story. But we're wondering, what do you think you would have done if you had driven by and seen a man lying on the side of the road? Would you have given up your vacation to help them?
Let's join now in singing "Lean on Me."
We are
turn on your videos and choose gallery view so that you can see each other. And say hello, put a greeting in the chat. If you're new with us this morning, we especially welcome you to let us know who you are. Otherwise, just wave, and if you want to put a message in, that's great too. Wow, so many people here this morning. Julie Caros, are you in California? No. Great to see so many people. Hello, Laura Schroeder. Hey, Ginny, great to see you. Sarah Laurel, Eleanor, Sue and Jack Goswa, Marlisa, you're all in one line on my screen. The Reutmans, Bill Whitehill, Sherry Hall Smith. Hello. Oh, it's so wonderful. Look at the 7 screens I have. 7 screens of people. Stephanie and Lyra, hey Wally, hi Paula. Kathy and Teresa, great to see you. Stephen and Laura Johnson, who are new. Hello Gail, hello Margaret, hello Jane, hello Peggy. Oh, so, wow, I'm only on screen 6. These are all the people who are hiding. It's good to see you, everybody who's here on audio only. Wonderful, wonderful to have so many people here. And now we will turn off our videos and please come back for the social hour. We will also now sing out everyone who is going to religious education. Now, it's the time in our service when we pause to be grateful for the gifts that we have, to share our gifts with others. The Hampshire County Interfaith Help Fund, Movement Voter Project, Neighbor to Neighbor, Western Mass Asylum Network, the UU Service Committee, and the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence. We're very grateful for people's continued support of Arita, our sanctuary guest who we've been supporting for the last 2 years as she fights her deportation order. We're grateful for your presence. We're grateful for each other's presence. We're grateful for all that we provide to support one another. What does your heart need now and in the weeks ahead? I invite you to sit with that as we spend a moment in silence together. For those who have stories to share, let us listen with open hearts as we commit to continue our free and responsible search for truth and meaning and covenant to honor the many paths we follow. Laura, I didn't give very good instructions on the tech guide, so there are two readings. The first is Mark and then Matthew, and then we sing, and then the second two readings. On Christmas Eve, many of us will gather on Zoom to hear the stories about the birth of Jesus and to sing many beloved Christmas carols. There is very little historical information about Jesus, and the stories about him, the ones that were written down and preserved, have some things in common and they have many differences. And this might suggest something about our own stories and how we make sense of events and people in our lives that are important to us, what we remember, what we forget, what we add, what we subtract. 4 accounts, there were more, but 4 accounts made it into the body of work that became the New Testament, the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And the Gospel of Mark is the earliest one. It's also the shortest one. It was probably written around year 70 of the Common Era, which was 40 years after the death of Jesus. There's no birth story in Mark. So the Gospel of Mark begins, in the beginning of the good news, this is the beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet. I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way, a voice of one calling in the wilderness. And so John the Baptist appeared in the wilderness, preaching a baptism of repentance. And this was his message. After me comes the one more powerful than I, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to stoop down and untie. At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son whom I love, with you I am well pleased." At once, the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days, being tempted by Satan. So by verse 12 of the first chapter of Mark, Jesus has heard God speak from on high, been sent out to pray and be tempted, and about 15 verses later, he is finished recruiting his first followers, and he's out healing and preaching. The book of Matthew is actually the first one in the New Testament in the Christian Bible, but it's probably the second one that was written. Exactly when is not certain, though. Sometime between year 85 of the Common Era, which would put it second after Mark, and possibly even the middle of the next century. Matthew takes the basic story from Mark and adds details, additional stories, sermons, and parables. It is in Matthew that we learn that King Herod ordered all baby boys to be killed, and where we read the story of the 3 kings who follow the star to Bethlehem. But none of that happens until chapter 2. So chapter 1 of Matthew starts like this. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron. This genealogy goes on for another page and a half. And then finally we read, thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Cameron, her husband, was faithful to the law, because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to dismiss her quietly. But an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus. Please join now in singing Mary Had a Baby.
Mary had a baby.
So the Gospel of Luke also uses Mark's story as its base, and it's in the Gospel of Luke that we learn about shepherds watching on the hillside when the baby is born. It takes Luke even longer to get to Jesus' birth than it does Matthew. Luke's Gospel begins like this. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. Since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. They were childless and they were both very old. An angel of the Lord appeared to Zechariah and said, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you. He will go on before the Lord to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Galilee to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph. Her name was Mary. The angel said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you. Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus." And Mary said, "My soul glorifies the Lord. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty." And the rest of the first chapter is about John the Baptist. Notice that in Matthew, the angel appears to Joseph and tells Joseph that Mary is pregnant through the Holy Spirit, and the angel instructs Joseph to keep her as his wife. In Luke, the angel appears to Mary, which might be a reason to prefer Luke's version over the others. The Gospel of John, which is not to be confused with John the Baptist, was written at the end of the 1st century, at least 70 years after Jesus' death. It doesn't use Mark as its base, and it's very, very different. It begins, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and that life was the light of all humankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. Yet to all who did receive him, he gave the right to become children of God." Now I invite you to join in singing "This Little Light of Mine."
This little light of mine.
start over. I hope you enjoyed that. It made me smile. There are those who have stories to share. Let's listen with open hearts and commit to continue our free and responsible search for truth and meaning as we covenant to honor the many paths we follow. This is a season for stories. The story of Hanukkah, the brave fighters miraculously defeating a mighty empire, the further miracle of lamp oil that lasts long after it should have run out, the story of the birth of Jesus with a worried husband and a young woman ready to give birth, their search for shelter, the appearance of singing angels, shepherds, star, both miracle stories and stories of hope. Storytellers make meaning through the ways they tell the tale, and we all do that. We pass on our wisdom, our history, and our joys and our sorrows by telling our stories. And we make and change the meaning, as I said, through the details we include, the details we forget or leave out, the parts we clarify, the parts we leave unclear. And the four gospel stories are different. They differ in who the writers thought Jesus was. They were written for different audiences. I was actually a little shocked when I was in seminary. It was really the first time I read the Gospel of Mark. And I was surprised at how cranky and annoyed his Jesus often is. Scholars agree that Matthew's community was a Jewish Christian one, and for Matthew, as you can tell, it was important to establish Jesus' descent from Jewish kings, Jesus' deep knowledge of the law, and his connection to and continuity with the prophets. For Matthew, the Christians were still very much Jews. Luke's gospel is where we see the emphasis on Jesus as a champion of the poor and oppressed. The story of the Good Samaritan, which we updated as the story of Motorcycle Luca, comes from the Gospel of Luke. And John's gospel is the most mystical, the hardest to understand. He wrote for a very specific community. And his Jesus, the way he envisions Jesus, Jesus is the least human and the most divine, even in his earthly incarnation. It's also the least universalist one. It's mostly from John that the later church drew stories to justify the horrific ages-long persecution of the Jewish people. And there are some memorable stories in John, like as when Jesus goes to a wedding and turns the water into wine. So what in any of the Gospels is true? The bare bones historical facts are that a troublemaker named Jesus from Nazareth was put to death by order of the Roman governor Pontius Pilate around year 30 of the Common Era, and that he had followers. Nearly every other detail in the gospel stories can't be verified from any historical source. Many of the details contradict one another. So what does that mean about their truth? I think we can say that the gospel stories are full of truths about love between siblings or parents and their children, truths about loyalty and betrayal, truths about power, about obedience to conscience and to a higher law, truths about loving our neighbor, about grief and despair and hope, about trust and about faith. What is true? What is truth? I'm pretty convinced that no one among us is more than 50% rational. And I'm pretty sure that we all hold inconsistent, incompatible beliefs, and that we behave in ways that are inconsistent with what we think and say we believe. I know I do. Think about how people across the country and around the world are approaching the risks during this pandemic. There are those who've decided to hunker down and stay in their homes as much as humanly possible. There are those whose jobs put them at higher risk of exposure, but who still go to work even if they don't have to. There are those who will attend a family gathering where they take off their masks, but they won't go get a haircut. There are those who get their hair cut but stay away from stores. There are those who actively refuse to wear masks as an assertion of their civil rights and whatever else they're asserting. There are others who complain about people who take down their masks while walking alone on an empty sidewalk in the neighborhood. What is true for the people in all of those different camps? Clearly, their truths are not shared. I also know that my own behaviors are not fully rational. Our younger son, Elliot, lives in New Hampshire, and I worry about how isolated he is, and I would have been very, very happy to see him at Thanksgiving. I called him a few days before Thanksgiving. I shouldn't be proud of this, I'm not. I called him to wheedle and whine. And he said to me, "Mom, I know this stinks, but what don't you understand about what the scientists and the governors are telling us to do?" Wisdom from our children. We are not completely rational, and we don't all agree. Taking this in a different direction, you may have friends or relatives whose political or social views run counter to yours, even friends and relatives whose views are abhorrent to you. Is it possible to love someone whose values or beliefs you abhor? Is it possible to have real conversations and be in relationship? Can you do that and be true to yourself? How do we engage in our own free and responsible search for truth and meaning and honor the paths others follow? So I keep asking those questions without having the answers, but in the spirit, again, of invitation for us to grapple with them together. And so I thought it might be fun for you to learn that gospel truth is, in one sense, an oxymoron, and that during the Advent season, the four Gospels can provide a lot to wonder about and reflect on in exploring how we make meaning through stories. If you're interested in pursuing that further, you can let me know. We could have a couple sessions in the new year if anybody's actually interested in learning more about that. And I told you last week and briefly about an opportunity coming this winter to reflect on our own stories and practice listening to others whose stories and truths are different from ours. Some of you were excited, some of you were annoyed, some of you wanted to know more. We are working on getting more information out, and we will provide lots of opportunities to ask questions before the program begins. Our fourth UU principle is the one that affirms each person's free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And our third principle encourages us to accept and encourage one another in our quest for spiritual growth. Our December theme is kindness. So this is a time to remind ourselves to be gentle with one another. That's what I'm trying to remind myself. Gentle during this time when the days are getting darker and the celebrations of light are tinged with sadness. This is a hard holiday season. And if you know of someone who is grieving during this time, if you yourself are grieving during this time, please come and please invite others to our service of loss, which is this Wednesday at 7. It's a quiet service. It's a little bit of music, a brief reflection, and an opportunity to light candles in honor and memory of people who you are remembering. Let us listen to one another with open hearts this season. All of us have stories to share. Our final hymn this morning is "Once in Royal David's City."
Once in
We will listen with open hearts to the stories we have to share, and we will treat each other with kindness in the days ahead. Thank you to our singers. It was wonderful to sing with you this morning. Go in peace.
Thank you, everyone, for this lovely service. I want to thank Rebecca Smith, who was my Zoom co-host this morning. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Janet, for that lovely service, and Jessica for the story. Thank you, Lemmy, for your accompaniment, and Booker, Dave, and Abby for your voices and harmonies. We are going to go to social hour, so I hope that many of you will stay on. I will get the breakout room set up in just a minute, and I hope that you'll meet some folks and share your day and talk about what is on your mind and heart today. Thank you.